Welcome, everyone. I'm very excited you're here. I'm very excited that Katie Price is going to speak today about public defense in Appalachia. And I won't take up too much more of her time. I'm going to go ahead and spotlight you, Katie, and take it away.
All right. Well, first of all, hi, everybody. It's really, really good to see you all. I miss you all very much. First, I'm sorry about my voice. I've just been battling a cold and all that stuff. And of course, it timed itself perfectly to not have a great voice for today, but it is what it is. I can speak. So that was an improvement from Monday. And I'm just going to keep it going and hopefully I can talk tomorrow. We'll see. Also, it's important to say that anything I express here, and I'm a lawyer, I'm a lawyer by the following sentence. Anything I say here it does not reflect the views of my employer. And it's not to be interpreted as legal advice or anything like that. It's just me sharing my personal experiences, which may or may not line up with the company line that is the government of Kentucky. So I guess the best place to start anywhere is the beginning. And I feel like I was kind of born to do this work. So if you don't know much about me, one thing is that, and one thing I'm very proud of, is that I grew up in an urban Appalachian community in Cincinnati. It's a fascinating history, and we certainly don't have time to go into it. And have lots of resources if you are interested. But I grew up in South Fairmount, more specifically, and I grew up in this kind of enclosed culture, and I lovingly refer to as Appalachian expats. So it's people, during this, just a quick overview, in the 70s and the 80s, when the economy in places like Tennessee, West Virginia, and Pennsylvania changed. A lot of people came to Cincinnati because of similar work knowledge. I don't know how else to put it, but essentially people had the work skills that was conducive to this area. Also, there's, if you look at where Appalachian people settled in Cincinnati, you'll notice that all of those areas have mountains, they're hills, but mountains around them. And there are these kind of insular communities. And if you look around you, it is kind of like being in a holler somewhere. So it makes sense to me that they settled where they settled. There's a lot going on with that story, right? Like there's a lot of poverty. I don't want to lead you all to a bunch of stereotypes because as you've probably encountered, people who are Appalachian, there's a lot of ridicule and a lot of classism, frankly. Just because you're Appalachian doesn't mean you're poor. Just because you're Appalachian doesn't mean you're not educated. It doesn't mean any of that. I happen to grow up very poor. I happen to be first generation, but that's not necessarily the experience of everybody with my cultural background. So just because it happens to align with the things that I'm saying and the people that I work with, I want to be careful to allow a bigger voice, right? There's not a homogenous group of Appalachian people. It's a really big span of places. There's lots of different nuanced cultures within. So just take this as these are my experiences, and they're important, and these are problems that should be taken seriously, but they're not everybody's problems. So I grew up very, very, very poor, very resource insecure. I did not have heat in my home. When it rained outside, it rained inside. It was rough. My education was everything. My dad's a tradesman. He essentially poured all of the money that he had into my brother's education and my education. And so I was able to get a private education early on. And then I ended up going to Walnut Hills, and that's maybe all I need to say to this crowd of people is that I went to Walnut Hills. But yeah, that helped a lot. I do say that, it's easy to have shame about my background, and I'm learning how to not do that anymore. And one truth is it is almost impossible to not interact with the criminal justice system when you're poor. Say you somehow get into a world where you don't have to commit any crimes. There's no situation where committing a crime makes your life slightly easier than it was if you didn't. Even if you are a completely law-abiding citizen in that situation, when it comes down to evictions and license suspensions and just constant nickel and diming of poverty, you will find yourself in a courtroom no matter what. And even for the most trivial things, can be looking at criminal consequences. And so I grew up surrounded by people who were incarcerated, both of my parents have criminal records. My dad still doesn't have the right to vote. Everyone around me where I live, had a criminal record for the most part. I grew up visiting people in prison. I grew up around the jails. I grew up knowing the system, not because, I happen to like my parents a lot. I don't think they're bad people. I don't think the people, I've met people in that situation that did things that consistently that I thought were unnecessarily bad. But for the most part, people end up doing the things that life pushes them into. And society is very desensitized to throwing them away and throwing away the key. And so I spent my whole life witnessing courtrooms and witnessing the impact of the system that took our parents away from us, that took all kinds of things away from us, that condemned my father's house, and it got torn down. He had to pay the city money to tear his house down, and things like that are disgusting. So my whole life, I'm just seeing so much injustice and so much unnecessary nonsense with the system inserting itself into what is essentially poverty. At some point, my dad ended up representing himself for a case. And so law books were around all the time. I didn't have a television when I was a kid, so I read constantly, and as did my father. And so all these law books kind of like replaced all the other books that would come in from the library. And I would page through them and read through them, and something hit me. And it was like kind of a general law practice book. And it was a whole chapter on the rights of children. And that changed my whole life, because I love my parents. They did the best that they could with the things that they had. But, when you grow up in that situation, there are a lot of things that you witness as a child that you shouldn't be witnessing, and a lot of intergenerational trauma that just kind of falls down the line. And it's hard to get away from those things, no matter how much you love your parents and how much they love you. And so to see on paper that some of the things that were happening to me were not supposed to happen to me, and that the system that was bullying my parents and everyone around me, in that same system, there was power, and I had rights. I had rights that blew my mind. It changed everything. I don't know if you know about, some people read a lot about trauma and how you work with trauma. There's a book called The Body Keeps Score. It's a really good book. One of the things that changes a person, people who are in the same traumatic situation, from one having PTSD and one not, is agency. The ability to change the situation, the ability to remove yourself, the ability to run away. If you have agency, that makes a huge difference in whether or not you are in a permanent state of trauma, essentially. And so this provided for me agency and the ability to navigate this world with less trauma. And it really did change my whole life, this idea that I could change this. This doesn't have to happen. It shouldn't happen this way. People have rights. And so what ended up happening is, and I'm a nerd. I'm not good at hiding it. And my mom and I would go to the downtown library, and I affectionately call her babysitter. And I was way too small, by the way, to be going up and down the floors of the downtown library by myself, but I was, and I would bury myself in the law section. And I don't know if you've ever seen like the Ohio Revised Code or any other state code books. They all look the same. They take up an entire section, and on the spine, there's numbers and subjects. And I figured out, and from that general law practice book, I was like, kids have rights. So I taught myself how to look up the section of those rights in the Ohio Revised Code. And then as I got older, I learned how to do it online. And yeah, I think I was born to do this job. I was born to be a lawyer. I'm so proud of the things that I get to do every single day. And my community informed the way I saw the world. And it definitely makes sense that I ended up here. So that's kind of the general background of where I came from and why it relates. I did get pregnant as a sophomore in high school. I know that sounds very young, but I beat my dad by 2 years. My dad was 14 when his first child was born. It's pretty normal for us to have kids very young. That doesn't mean it's good. It doesn't mean it's okay. But, I had to push hard to get where I am today. And I'm not going to hide that fact. I'm proud of that fact. And I will say it whenever I get a chance to say it. I did not have a car. I did not have a lot of help with my son. I had 2 jobs through most of college. I had to take buses everywhere. Sometimes that was 6 to 8 buses a day. I had nothing. I had very little to offer my son. The reason he had anything at all is because my friends were very helpful. I busted my butt to get here. And through that, saw more poverty. I saw, how ridiculous, I had to go to the welfare office twice a month on a bus to show them I was still in school. And those were hours I could have been working, right? I was experiencing these little nuances of what made poverty, when you're trying to get out of poverty, even harder. And those were also very invaluable experiences that built a lot of my practice and how I understand what's going on with my clients. So I graduated Walnut with honors on time, and I graduated college at Xavier with honors on time, and I graduated law school with honors on time. And I did a lot of that without as much support as I needed, but with lots of support that I'm very, very grateful for. I knew that I would work in public works. I just couldn't imagine a world where I was billing people by the hour. I wanted to work with poor people. I always knew I wasn't going to be rich, and that I would go into public works. In my head, that meant legal aid. I was thinking legal aid in Cincinnati. What ended up happening, as life sometimes throws you into random places, I ended up working for the public defender's office in Kentucky. I'm not going to put out names and stuff. I have to be careful about not naming the organization and all that fun stuff. There are only 2 organizations in Kentucky, and I don't work in Louisville, so you can figure out which one I work for. And just by complete coincidence, I ended up as a public defender in Newport, Kentucky. And it was an amazing, amazing experience. And it really threw me into a world that I don't know that I was completely ready for, but I'm very grateful I did. And I know for a fact that the principles that we abide by, the ones that we say to the world, look at us, we're great. Those are the things that if I want to be good at my job, I have to practice every single day. So I'm very grateful that I got to work in Kentucky. It's actually allowed me to work through a lot of the traumatic things, right? Agency is the difference between PTSD and not. And I get to kind of go back in time a little bit and help people and change situations. I couldn't change them then, but I can change them now. And I'm really very empowered by it. That being said, there are situations where I really have to be the best person I can possibly be to do my job. There are a lot of challenges. There are a lot of, sometimes I can't do anything for that person, and that sucks. Sometimes, sometimes the things that they did are accused of doing are horrifying. At the end of the day, I'm still a person. I'm still a person who's been negatively impacted by people doing illegal things, right? I've been a victim. I've experienced people being victims. And so I'm representing people who a lot of the time have victimized somebody. And I do not want to trigger anyone with this discussion at all. So please, don't let your mind go into places you can't go right now. But, without triggering you, if you had in your head the worst possible crime someone could commit, if you're like, this is the thing that causes the most harm to, another human being, I have a client, at least one client, who has done that thing. Every single person, every single thought that exists here right now that everyone's having, I have at least one client who's done that thing. And it is hard sometimes to separate yourself from empathy of the person who was hurt. And sometimes it's like that person was, accused of a crime and they didn't commit it. That's easy. The Innocence Project, it's not an easy thing to do, but that's an easy thing to practice. Because it's easy to say in your heart, that person didn't even do the thing. I can stand up for this person. I can be an advocate for this person. They didn't do the wrong thing. It's a lot harder to say, there's a good chance that person did that thing. That person has told me they did that thing. What am I going to do now? And I have to be the best person I can possibly be to deal with that situation. One way I deal with that is by meeting my clients before I read anything in their file, which, let me tell you, can be very awkward because sometimes I'm like, I don't know why I'm here. I needed to face here. I needed to hear your voice. I needed to know your name. I needed to know about your children. I needed to know about your upbringing. I needed to know how you got here. I'm going to have an extensive conversation with you before I look at the things on paper that you did or maybe didn't do or did some version of, or, all the things in between. Because I need to humanize that person before I look at the other stuff, because it is really easy. It is really easy, alarmingly easy, to boil someone down to their DOC number and a list of things that they did on a page. It's one of those things where sometimes it's easier to deal with it when you're just like, if you're dehumanizing, and I can't afford to do that in my job. I can't do my job effectively if that's what I'm doing. And so who I am as a Unitarian is absolutely crucial to every single day. So the number one thing is the inherent dignity and worth of every person. That is my battle cry. That is my mantra. That is the thing that plays in my head over and over and over again. When I'm sitting in front of someone who has done something that just horrifies me, because I'm a person. I have a child. I've been a child. I've been a woman. I've been, and men are also victimized, but I've been in the position to be very empathetic towards a lot of victims. And I have to say, every single person, there's no asterisk after that. There's no thing that says every single person, but this person who did this thing we don't like. No, every single person has inherent worth and dignity, every single one. What does that mean? Does that mean I just say, oh, that person exists? No, it means I do my job. It means that person has inherent worth and dignity. Every single person I encounter deserves someone in the courtroom who's standing up for them. Every single person. Because it's easy to boil people down to paper, things on papers. Everyone else in that courtroom is going to dehumanize them, every single one. People in that room want to incarcerate them for as long as possible, even though really the things that happen when you're incarcerated are human rights violations. Are we okay with that? No matter what someone did, are we okay with that? I'm not. Someone, no matter who they are, no matter what they did, they are a human person with inherent worth and dignity. And they need me to stand up for them because someone should. It's never as simple as what was on that paper, ever. I have to have the discipline every single day for that to be the thing in my head. You know, people, I think that's why lawyers get such a bad rap. Besides the stupid jokes of whatever, you know, we actually have a lot of rules that we have to live by, but we're not, the public's not joking about those. You know, I think the thing that gets us on the bad side of everyone is we defend people that the mob doesn't like. Think about how crucial that is, though. And you can have a utilitarian view of it, right? Like, well, not every person is guilty. And so it's important that every single person has a defender just in case they're innocent. That's easy. No, every single person deserves someone to defend them, even if they're guilty. That's a harder concept to get comfortable with. But that's what's demanded of me as a Unitarian. And I happen to think that it's demanded of everyone as a Unitarian. I joke that if you're a public defender, you're a Unitarian. Like, if you look through our principles, those are all pretty much solidly on my resume, right? Like, I don't have them absolutely memorized. I'm going to look to the side. I know that how much people like that in a presentation, but justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. Yep. That's what I have to do. Justice, big deal in my line of work. Compassion, yes, you have to care about that person. You learn their story. None of this stuff happened in a vacuum. Every single person I've ever met that victimized someone was a victim at one time or another. Where we draw those lines, it depends on a lot of things, but I, as their advocate, I can't afford to be drawing those lines. I have to have compassion for that person, no matter what. So the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. I could put it on my, those wall decals? I need one of those. I just need the Unitarian principle in wall decal on my wall because they all apply. They do. And it's, I think that it is easy to say, oh, I'm a Unitarian when I'm volunteering at a food thing, which are absolutely crucial. I'm not doing that. I should be. But when I'm doing something that's, easy to have compassion, it's when it's hard that we have to buckle down and decide that that's what we're going to do. So I'll keep going through. I can go through all of them if you want, but I just highlighted the important ones, or they're all important, but the ones that feel most relevant. So respect for the interdependent web of all existence, of which we are a part. That when I fight for that person, I'm fighting for that person. I'm fighting for that culture. I'm fighting for my culture. I'm fighting for me, and I'm fighting for you. We are all related. Every single person, every single thing is intertwined with the other things. And so even when you're fighting for the person who is the lowest person in if you were ranking if you were ranking people, please don't do that. But like, if you were, that it is absolutely crucial that we treat that person like they're us, because we're all related. I don't want to keep going on forever, but I'll leave you with a couple of thoughts. The title of this presentation is a reference to a Bible verse. I know Christianity leaves, a bad taste in people's mouths sometimes, and I understand why. I grew up a Christian. I understand why it's hard for some people, but there's some stuff in the book that I like, and that verse is one of them, and it's essentially, what you do for the least of these, you do for me. And that's what you do for the people, the lowest of the lowest people. If you were ranking people, you're doing that for God. What you do for them matters. It is a basic human concept that what you do for the people you don't like is what matters. It matters just as much as what you do for the people you do. Also, please stop making fun of people's accents. Sorry, that's like going to be my last thought here. But like, being part of a certain culture does not make you stupid. I've had to hide my accent my whole life. People think my father's an idiot. I've walked around. I've seen it on TV. I've seen it in everything. It is absolutely culturally acceptable in the United States to make fun of people who are Appalachian. And I'm really tired of it. And I really am going to ask you on this platform if, as a community, my community, if we could get rid of those stereotypes from how we talk about people who don't agree with us politically, perhaps, or, people we don't like, because, an accent does not equal a personality. So I'm going to throw that out there. But if anything, I hope that as Unitarians, we can all do the thing that we're being called to do, which is do for everyone. Every single person has inherent dignity and worth. Every single one. And that's a verb. That's not an idea in a head. It's not a pretty thing I put on my wall and I haven't. It's a verb. We do that. We show that with our actions. So that's my big my Unitarian spiel that I'm not allowed to give because I work for the government. We can't promote religion. So you're my only outlet, really. All right, so I think we kind of got started a little bit late, and I know we're hitting 7:30 now, but there's time for discussion. So if, obviously people have other things to do, I understand that, but
I'm so sorry. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you, Katie. My computer just went wonky as you finished up, so I can't seem to take you off of Spotlight. And
I was born to be here, man.
I wanted to say that was a sermon. Thank you.
Jessica. That was pretty.
Yeah. So I just want to open it up. If you have something, if you have a question, we'll spend 15 more minutes here, and just go ahead and unmute yourself and speak up. We'll do it popcorn style since I can't seem to change us to gallery view or anything.
May I ask?
Thank you, Katie.
Oh,
You are right. We do that, don't we?
Katie,
Yeah, we make judgments.
Yeah.
Katie,
yes.
I'm not a lawyer, but I was a social worker, and at times I had to deal with people who had done heinous things. And what helped me is, at one point I took a course. It was called Ed Psych, and it was about dealing with children. And one time the instructor said that no child is born bad. If they are acting bad, something has gotten in the way. And I thought about that, and it really helped me, because I realized that no parent sets out to be a bad parent. no marital partner sets out to be a bad marital partner. Whatever it is, that isn't what they intended. It's not what happened. And I found that if I could begin by relating to someone by saying something, things haven't worked out the way you hoped. We were immediately in a relationship that was constructive, because then we could go on and talk about what they might do that might lead to more satisfactory results in their life.
Absolutely. I think that everyone is doing the best that they can. And that's a hard concept because you're thinking like, but they could do better. No, every single person is doing the best that they can. That day,
Right.
moment, that is their best. No one walks around the world like, I'm going to do slightly less than my best today. Nobody's doing that.
Okay. May I ask?
The things I
Katie,
over-
oh, well, I was going to
over and
ask.
over is that I observed that some
people.
people had awfully poor roadmaps to go by, that there was nothing in their background that prepared them to be a good parent or a good spouse or to be an upstanding citizen, that they had very poor examples and they were trying to achieve something, but they didn't know how to get there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Martha, I'm sorry. You were saying,
Yes, I just wondered, I don't know if you feel you can do this, but if you would mention a case or two along, people that were kind of difficult to defend and yet,
yeah, I have to be very, very careful about the things that I say, but I am comfortable with one because I think it describes enough people that I've represented that you couldn't narrow it down. I have a client or I have lots of clients actually who are severely mentally impaired, have severe IQs in like the 60s, like are at a severe disadvantage intellectually, and they are intellectually children. Then they occasionally do things to children who they are equals to in their own head, but they aren't. They're adults, and those cases are hard. Those cases are really hard because you don't want to walk into a room and there's just no situation where you're like, that was okay. There's no mitigating circumstance that changes the fact that that child was victimized. That it will never be okay. But you have to look at this person and say, they have the IQ of a 10-year-old. What are we going to do with this person? And often the answer is throw them in a prison system where they will be attacked daily for their crimes on a piece of paper as they're listed. And you better believe there is no thing that says, and they have an IQ under 60 under the the lines of details of what it is that they did. Those are hard. Those are really hard because you can't allow those things to happen to children. There's no easy answer, but I know the one I'm seeing isn't the right one either. So those are hard sometimes. And those are hard on explaining to people level and social justice ways, The ones that I find really hard just personally are the ones where I'm like, you had opportunities to not hurt that person. You had opportunities to do the better thing and you didn't take it. You had the resources to not do that thing. You knew it was wrong. You hurt someone. You hurt a person who is going to spend the rest of their lives dealing with the consequences of the thing that you did. And I'm thinking that in my head. And then I'm saying, hello, how are you today? How are your kids? What's going on with you? And those can be hard. Sometimes there's people that just, they do not understand the gravity. They have the capacity to understand the gravity, but they choose not to. And those things are hard. Those are really hard.
Mhm. Yeah. Do you feel like you get enough help from the helping organizations? Uh, I guess we'll never have enough.
No, it's we need more. I mean, we need more social workers. We need
Yeah.
more. We need that all across the board. I've seen police police organizations when they have social workers in their offices, that their entire mentality changes. And I think that needs to be sprinkled all throughout the system. I think that I mean, this is not the view of my employer, but it is my personal view that we are asking the state to pay us the same that they pay the prosecutors. We're paid less than prosecutors,
Mhm.
but people have a fundamental right to me, and I'm paid less than the people trying to convict them. That just doesn't make sense, and it doesn't. And I'm not here for the money, but it does impact my ability to pay for daycare. It does impact my ability to take care of the things around me so I can do my job better. And so it's not just about the money. There are actual consequences of paying less than the people you're paying to throw these people away. Yes, Martha.
Katie, thank you for pointing out the principles from Unitarianism and how they apply to your life. And I just thought it was really helpful. I think my life is less complicated than yours, but still it was just a good reminder. And your comment about being the best person that we can, it's appropriate in any circumstance. Thank you.
I appreciate that. I'm grateful to this community too, because I see the things that you guys are doing, and because you're in different contexts, that gives me the spirit that how you translate that from less complicated, like less dire things, how that's supposed to translate into how I act, because it's a lot easier to say, well, there's no example for me, but that's not true in this community. And, everybody in this community is working to help the life of someone else. And that makes a huge difference in how I keep going, even in the community. My work community doesn't necessarily have that same level of, let's say, social pressure to maintain that spirit of community.
Thank you.
Have you found a Unitarian church?
I think I'm going to stay with you guys. I'm in Cincinnati about every other week, every other weekend anyway. I mean, there's some things that are just makes it too hard, but once we go back on a regular basis, the answer is there's one Unitarian organization in Frankfurt. They are not an actual church. They just meet together every once in a while. So that's cool. But I don't think I can give you guys up. I like you too much.
Okay. Yes.
Any last questions for Katie?
Well, we got quite a bit of time.
I just want to say thank you, Katie. And, growing up, I don't know if I really knew the term Appalachian. I don't know if that was brought up that much in my generation. But I remember having a school friend from West High who invited me to her house one time. And it was in the lower part of Price Hill. And she was thrilled about this new apartment. And it was, when I got there, it was a one-room apartment, and everybody slept on the floor, and everybody had their own box for their clothes. And she thought it was fantastic. And when you shared about what your home was like, it's like, oh, this was an upgrade, and I thought my family was more the lower middle class, but we had, my sister and I shared a room. My brother had his own room. So there was more space in that sense. Although I know at one point my father had brought his sister-in-law and 3 children in the same space, to live.
What?
Yeah, so it was close quarters before I was born. But, you know, that family was important. And so I think maybe she was Appalachian. I'm not 100% sure. But
If she lived in Lower Price Hill, there's a pretty good chance. There are a lot of good maps of Cincinnati and not just Appalachian communities, but Appalachian poverty, like communities in poverty versus not. So yeah, Lower Price Hill, South Fairmount, those are, yes, very Appalachian areas that I wouldn't surprise me a bit. Was the food good? Because if the food was good, then she was probably Appalachian. Let's settle with that.
if it was good. She had good
All
food.
right. If it had flavor, it was us.
You know, and you know, and to me it's kind of amazing because even like when I had read something from my cousin when they got out of the camps, they got a house that she was their own place, but it had no running water, it had no electricity, you know, and they felt really, you know, an upgrade was when they built an outhouse, you know, and so that, you know, it's like, where did you come from and how that whole process, you know, and how dedicated your parents were about getting your education. To me, I am, you know, amazed, you know, when parents who have nothing make that focus of making their life so much better for their children and knowing that education is their way out.
I appreciate that. I'm infinitely blessed. My parents aren't educated. My mom is now. My mom graduated college the same day I did. So that's
neat.
But it's there no TV. No TV made a big difference because all I could do is read, you know. But yeah, like when your parents prioritize the right things, it's easier to do the right things, right? I see all of our resources pouring into our education. That means no heat, right? I've been trained. You give up heat so you can learn. And that puts it as like a whole other level, it makes it way more important. Also, school happens to be warm, and I liked it there a lot. They fed me. They made me baby blankets. If your name is Miss Ramstad, and bought me books. And
Katie, I want to thank you for giving an excellent presentation. I'm tearful about it, but you not only helped us understand Appalachian culture, but how far we can go to apply the inherent worth and dignity of each person. Unbelievable. And I want to ask Meredith, how do we access this recording? Because I know someone in particular who would benefit from it.
So hopefully whatever is glitching on my computer doesn't mean that this recording is lost. If this recording is not lost, then it will be put up by tomorrow at noon on the YouTube channel. So if you go to First Unitarian Church's YouTube channel, you can find it there.
Right.
If this recording's lost, I'll send out an announcement, unfortunately.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
I'm glad that it had an impact, and I think I could go on forever. I learned a lot from how I grew up. I learned a lot about community. I learned a lot about saying what you mean and being forthright and having integrity and what you say. There are a lot of cultural advantages I gained and made me a better Unitarian, even though there are a lot of stereotypes about my culture that make, that are kind of counter to that. And that narrative really is upsetting to me. But yeah, I appreciate that. And I want everyone to see it as a celebrated culture, and not everybody's Appalachian's poor, but I was, but I'm glad that it has an impact, and I'm happy to talk about it to whomever, whenever. I'm proud of where I came from.
Yeah.
Katie, thank you so much for sharing your story.
Oh, of course. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very
Katie?
much.
And
I really
don't drop us,
appreciate-
Katie. Don't drop us. Stick with us. We need you.
I,
Yeah, I do.
I have to. I like you guys too much. I just can't. I can't quit you.
Katie, I really appreciate your insight, your intelligence, your wit, and your compassion. Thank you so much for sharing it all with us.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you for supporting it.
Right, gosh.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Stay safe, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.